tonight we have with us panelists Dr. Melvin Thornton from American Fertility and Megan Hall from SURROGATES. I would like to share my screen just now to show you the beginning of this presentation. Let me see. Here we are. So just a little housekeeping. We are going to speak in this order. First it will be Dr. Thornton, then it will be Megan Hall, and then I will speak a little bit from the intended parent's perspective, since I'm a former intended parent. And we will also have some time for questions and answers. In the application itself of the webinar, you will see Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You can type your answers in there, and then we'll answer them right at the end when we finish. So I would like to introduce you first to Dr. Melvin Thornton, who is the Medical Director for American Fertility Services. So I'm going to let Dr. Thornton share his screen so he can start. Let me see. Okay, here we are. Dr. Thornton, when you wish, you can start with your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. And 1 second here, we're going to share. All right. How is everyone today? Welcome to our webinar. And what I'd like to do is to give you a very nice overview of the process for egg donation and surrogacy. This is an exciting time for all of us because that means you are either starting your journey or you may be on your journey. And I like to share the excitement because you know, helping couples have families is what we love to do. So just to get started, I just want to let you know that the surrogacy agencies and IVF clinics, we work as partners. We have a nice partnership. And the IVF clinic, what we focus is on everything for creating your embryos, helping you select the egg donors, screening your surrogate, and doing the transfers and following the surrogate for 12 weeks of the pregnancy. And the surrogacy agency works with us to identify the surrogate, and they do all the legal, which is what Megan's going to talk about soon. So let's get started on our exciting journey today for our webinar. And the most important thing we're going to talk about today is going to be screening. Screening your egg donors, screening yourself if you're going to use your own eggs to carry, to have a surrogate carry, and screening the male partners as well as the surrogate. For egg donation, there's different types of egg donors. We have anonymous egg donors, and we have what we call known or directed egg donors. The difference between the two is with anonymous, you don't know any of her demographics, but you can also meet her in person. You can do a video conference with her. She can still remain anonymous. Whereas with a directed or known donor, this is someone that you know complete demographics. And this is important where you want the donor to be available to meet your children in the future. So you want to make sure you have a known or directed egg donor. And these always require legal contracts. A lot of people always ask, well, how's the egg donor screened? And the most important thing is that egg donor screening is a very rigorous process. Of all the applicants that we get, only about 5% are actually accepted to go into our final database. So on a monthly basis, we may receive about 200 or 300 phone calls for potential donors. Of those that come in, about 30 or 40 are asked to come in to do the questionnaire. And of those, only 1 or 2 are actually selected for the final process to go into the database. When we do the initial screening, we get a lot of information on our donors. We want to know about her likes, her interests. We ask them to do a personal essay. We review their family health, any obstetrical health, if they've been pregnant before. We always ask for photographs. So we get to know who the donor is as we're screening her. And donors are a very exciting time because donors love to donate, and they're excited to actually help couples for the egg donation process. So the information that we get from our egg donors, a lot of our egg donors will create videos just like this to give a more personal approach so you can understand who she is and why she likes to donate. So that way you get to know your donor very personally. commonly used criteria that we use, particularly here at American Fertility Services, is that we like to have young women between the ages of 21 to 30. We want to make sure they have a very healthy, no medical issues, and make sure their infectious disease screening is normal. We do screen them for genetics. We do a panel consisting of 300 recessive traits just to make sure we know all about their genetics as well. When we're screening our egg donors, besides the personal health history, they will have a medical be evaluated by the physician here at AFS. The things that we're looking for are infectious disease risk factor questionnaires, infectious disease screening. We do infectious disease screening for HIV, hepatitis B and hepatitis C, etc. Doing the initial screening, and then the FDA requires us to repeat that screening within 30 days of her donating the eggs. If you have a donor who's donated before, we'll review her past donations to make sure we put on the correct amount of medication and make sure she is a good candidate for you to donate in the future. The most important test that we do is we want to make sure she's going to be able to give us enough healthy eggs that you can be successful in your journey. So we always want to assess her for some hormone levels, and we do an ultrasound called an antral follicle count, and this is an ultrasound of an ovary. And the idea, it looks like a chocolate chip cookie, and the more the chocolate chips means the more of an egg reserve she has, which means she should be a great responder and make a good number of eggs so you can be successful. Another test that we do is a anti-Müllerian hormone test, and anti-Müllerian hormone testing is a test of hormone status. These hormones are made by the eggs, and the idea is the more eggs you have, the higher your hormone levels should be. And as you'll see here in the green level, we want to select donors who are in the green level, which means they have a great reserve of eggs and they'll respond really well to the medications. And we know they'll have a good outcome for you as an egg donor. There are some cases in surrogacy where you're not going to be using an egg donor, but you may have a friend, or you may be using your own eggs to create embryos to transfer to a surrogate. And we do the same type of screening that we would do for our egg donors. We do the same medical and physical requirements, as well as the same infectious disease blood work for the FDA within 30 days of the retrieval. We always want to do an initial sperm analysis to make sure we have a healthy sperm count. In addition to the sperm analysis, we do a physical examination, and then within 7 days of using the sperm, we will do FDA screening, FDA questionnaire. In most cases of surrogacy, we do recommend using frozen sperm. It's very convenient as far as timing of the egg retrieval and when the sperm is being used. And fresh sperm and frozen sperm have the same success rate. So we do encourage everyone to come to the clinic and freeze a sperm sample to use with the egg donation process. As far as screening surrogates, the first thing that occurs is that the surrogacy agency like Serial Connection, they will identify a potential candidate. They will send over the medical records, and we will review the medical records to make sure she's a good candidate to be a surrogate. And a lot of people say, what is a good candidate to be a surrogate? Well, someone who's typically under the age of 43. They're healthy, they don't smoke, they've had pregnancies before, all the pregnancies have been uncomplicated. We like to see potential surrogates that may have had 2 or 3 C-sections at the most. So we're screening these medical records to make sure they're healthy candidates for you to be a surrogate. Once we identify her medical records are good to go for being a surrogate, one of the final screening process that she will do is that we'll do infectious disease screening for HIV, hepatitis B and C, gonorrhea and syphilis for her and her sexually intimate partner. And then we do what's called a saline sonogram. So on the screen, you're going to see a picture of a uterus. And this area here is what we call the lining of the uterus there. And what we do is that we put saline into the uterus, and saline on ultrasound shows up as black. So what we've done is that we fill the inside of the uterus with saline, allows us to look inside to make sure there's nothing inside the uterus that could interfere with the embryo implanting. So this is an example of a normal saline sonogram. And what we're looking for are things like this, which are called endometrial polyps or fibroids. That would mean that the embryo would have a hard time implanting because of the inflammation caused by the polyp or the fibroid. What I want to do now is just kind of walk you through how the IVF process works. The first part of the IVF is ovarian stimulation, where the egg donors will take fertility drugs to get them to make multiple eggs. If we have a egg donor selected from our database, which means she's local to our clinic, she'll do all her monitoring here. If you work at an egg donor who, with an agency egg donor, and the egg donor lives in a different state, then what will happen, she would do her initial monitoring close to her home, and then she'll fly here for the last few days of the monitoring as well as the retrieval. And that goes the same way for women who are using their own eggs, or if you have a known donor, if she lives local in the States, she'll do her local monitoring and then fly here for the retrieval. Or if you're international and we're going to be using your own eggs for the surrogacy process, your egg stimulation will start locally for you, and you'll fly to the US usually about the 7th or 8th day of the medications and stay here through your retrieval. So you're here in the States for approximately 5 to 10 days. So the egg donor undergoes the stimulation, and what you see on the screen here, these little black circles, all the eggs are the follicles. She undergoes the egg retrieval, which is an outpatient procedure, which takes about 15 to 20 minutes to do from start to finish. It's very, the egg donors are very comfortable doing this procedure because we do give them IV sedation so they don't feel anything. Once they have the eggs retrieved, they're able to go home the same day, usually within an hour after the procedure is completed. They're able to go home, and we ask them not to work that day, but they can go back to work or back to school the following day. Now that's the day that we thaw the sperm. So what you see here, this is the initial sperm ejaculate, and around the sperm, you're gonna see lots of clumpy sperm and debris. We will need to wash that debris and unhealthy sperm away, so we're left with the healthiest sperm. This sperm is now ready to fertilize the egg. The next step in the process is to take one egg and surround it with thousands and thousands of sperm, which is what happens in nature in the fallopian tube. The only problem with that is that human reproduction is very inefficient. And if I take this egg surrounded with thousands and thousands of healthy sperm, the fertilization rates are very poor. About 50% of these eggs will actually fertilize. And because eggs are very valuable, we don't want to waste any. We do a procedure called intracytoplasmic sperm injection. And that's where we take one healthy sperm and we inject that sperm directly into the egg, as you see here. And by doing this, we increase our fertilization rates to about 85 to 90% with the ICSI procedure, so we're more efficient with every egg that's being created. This is an example of what we call a split sperm source. So this is a couple with two sperm sources. So you can see here there were 20 eggs that are retrieved and are mature. And what we do is that we take half the eggs and we'll use it with the one partner, and then the second half of the eggs are used with the other partner. So for example, here you'll see John Doe is number 1. We take the first 10 eggs and we injected his sperm into the first 10 eggs, and then this other 10 eggs are injected with Adam Doe. So that way we do a 50-50 sperm split. Each of the embryos come back the next day to see how many eggs are fertilized. Here we're seeing genetic information from the male and genetic information from the female, confirming that the egg is fertilized normally. We let the embryos develop in the laboratory, and by the 3rd day, they're at a 6 to 8 cell stage. And what's very important is that the eggs are always numbered, so we know exactly what sperm source that egg came from, okay? Each step along the way, so we know that egg number 1 was fertilized with John Doe's sperm, and what we do, we see how did that embryo look on day 3, and then we let that embryo develop to what's called a blastocyst stage, which is a stage where the embryo has the ability to implant. A blastocyst embryo is an embryo developed into the cells that become the baby and the cells that become the placenta. So this has progressed from a 1-cell stage to an 8-cell stage to at the time of a blastocyst stage over 200 cells. So this is what it looks like. These are 6 embryos here, and it takes 5 or 6 days to become a blastocyst, and these 3 here are the nice healthy blastocysts. These 3 here haven't become blastocysts yet, so we'll let them develop 1 more day to see if they become viable blastocysts, and then we can freeze them, biopsy them the next day. So embryos become the blastocysts. They are graded, and everyone always asks, well, what is the grade of my embryo? And what grading means is that your embryologist will assess the quality of the inner cell mass, which becomes the baby, and the quality of the cells that become the placenta, or what's called the trifecta there. And they will grade that from A through C, and only A and B grade embryos can lead to a healthy baby. So what you'll see in this next example is here, the embryos I graded the first letter is for the cells become the baby, or the inner cell mass. The second letter for the cells become the placenta. So they're graded A's and B's. And any embryo that's frozen and graded A or B can lead to a healthy baby. A lot of people think I have to have a lot of A embryos, but realistically, most babies in the United States are born from B grade embryos, and that's because embryologists are very tough graders, and they very seldomly give out A's. So the majority of embryos that we do transfer are B grade embryos. So the most embryos are for babies are from B grade embryos. Now, even though we looked at an embryo and we said, you know what, this embryo is a very good quality embryo and it's an A grade embryo, even from a young healthy egg donor, what you're going to see is that 40% of these embryos are going to be abnormal. And the problem with that is that abnormal embryos, do not implant, or they can lead to miscarriage. So basically, if you have 10 beautiful embryos graded A, only 4 or at least 6 of those embryos will have the ability to lead to a healthy baby. So we do a procedure called preimplantation genetic screening, which is where we biopsy the cells to become the placenta. So what you see here, this is a blastocyst stage embryo. The cells that become the baby are way back here, and then these are the cells that can become the placenta. And what you see is that the embryologist carefully manipulates the embryo. And this is a very nice picture because it's a nice 3-dimensional, good quality embryo. They identify 5 cells here, and the embryologist here will identify those cells, draw them up into the micromanipulator, and using laser technology, will make a precise cut on these cells here. You see it comes across, and then these cells are removed from the embryo. It does not damage the embryo. The embryo at that point in time has been biopsied. This embryo will then be frozen, and then these cells that will come out of here will now be sent to the laboratory. And 7 to 10 days later, we're going to get the results, and we'll find out if this embryo has normal chromosomes, and we also will find out the sex of the embryo. So this is a small cell sample. Remember, we're removing 5 or 6 cells out of an embryo that has over 200 cells. So we send that to the laboratory, and what happens is that we get a report, and a normal chromosome embryo has a straight line across, okay? Embryos that are abnormal, they have not enough chromosomes or too many chromosomes. What you'll see is that this embryo here has an extra chromosome number 10 and is missing a chromosome number 10 and has an extra chromosome number 18, which means this is an abnormal embryo, which means this embryo would not have the ability to implant, so that embryo would not be transferred. And by doing that, the pre-implantation genetic screening, we're able to select the best embryo for transfer, okay? And this allows us to increase the likelihood of having a single embryo transfer, which is what all clinics are striving to do nowadays, is to transfer a single embryo. Now, a couple of things I just want to focus on before I finish. Fresh versus frozen embryos, all the data in the literature in the world has been showing that frozen embryos are just as successful as fresh embryos because of our freezing technology is improved. And also babies born from frozen embryos have been shown to have lower risk of preterm labor, increased live birth rates, and decreased miscarriage rates. So now when we're doing surrogacy programs, everything is frozen, and what that does allows for ease of synchronization between the embryos that are frozen and the surrogate. So once your contracts are completed and you're ready for the transfer, we prepare the uterus. So here is a uterus that's at baseline. The most important thing to focus on is the lining of the uterus, which is very thin. Now we prepare her uterus by giving her hormones, and the hormones, which are called estrogen, will build the lining of the uterus up. So now it's nice and thick, which is a good lining for the embryo to implant. The embryo, like the single embryo, hopefully we do single embryo transfers, but somebody choose to transfer 2 embryos. They're thawed on the day of the transfer. The embryos are loaded into a catheter, and just like a woman's having a pap smear, the embryos then transferred into the lining of the uterus, and we use ultrasound guidance to make sure the embryos are placed in the proper position here. The next thing is, how many embryos do we recommend transferring? In the United States, what you see in our graph is that we're doing more and more single embryo transfers, and that this is because we really want to reduce the risk of multiple pregnancies, such as twins and triplets. So we really encourage doing single embryo transfers. And the reason why is because when you have multiple gestation, the biggest risk is to the surrogate. There's a risk of high blood pressure in the pregnancy, diabetes in the pregnancy, more bleeding complications, and miscarriage. as well as preterm labor and preterm delivery. So all the clinics here in the US are now striving to transfer single embryos, because our success rates with a single embryo transfer is the same with a dual embryo transfer. So what you're looking here, this is a success rates with a single embryo transfer. These are success rates with a dual embryo transfer. You'll see they're exactly the same. The only thing that's different is that if we transfer 2 embryos, the risk of twins is close to 40%, whereas if we transfer 1, the risk of twins is about 1 to 2% because that embryo can't split. And this is really important because the incidence of preterm labor and preterm delivery increase with the number of embryos that you transfer. You can see that the risk of preterm labor is about 3 times to 4 times higher than what you would get with a single embryo transfer compared to transferring 2. So I wanted to share all that information, and like I say, the technologies are very exciting. Success rates are very high in the ideal circumstance with the healthy sperm and a healthy egg. With a healthy surrogate, the outcomes are very good with the single embryo transfer. Success rates in our laboratory are 90% pregnancy rates, and our ongoing pregnancy rates are 85% with the single embryo transfer. So we encourage everyone to consider doing single embryo transfers. That's the end of my presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we'll give that over to back to Juan, and Juan can take it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thornton. So now we're going to listen to Megan Hall, who is former surrogate and the director of surrogacy agency SurroConnections. So Megan, whenever you're ready. Just by the way, I've seen there is a question from David on the questions and answers. I have seen that. We will answer all the questions that you type in there right at the end of the presentation. Thank you, Megan, when you wish.
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Juan, does
Yes.
that sound okay? All right, great. Well, thank you, everyone, for stopping by today. Well, I'm one of the agencies that works very closely with American Fertility Services. And here we go. A little bit about me. I started this business about 10 years ago. I'm a 4-time gestational surrogate. I handle most of the intended parents, whereas the surrogates have their own case manager. It is my goal to be fully invested in every single journey. Our agency really tries to maintain a 3 to 5 new client intake every single month. So we're very, we provide a very specialized and personal service. We really value honesty, integrity, transparency in this journey, and positive relationships, not only with between the intended parents and the surrogates, but also with the clinics, the attorneys, and everyone that really touches your case, all the way through the birth and delivery at the hospital. We work internationally all the time. Actually, about 75% of our clients are international, just because we really provide that close service all the way through birth, delivery, and then getting you passports and getting you back home. I started doing this business 10 years ago, but really full time, about 5. And I'm so grateful every single day that I get to see families born. We actually had just a baby this morning born, and I get to go see them shortly. So this first step is sometimes the hardest. I always tell people, once you make that choice, that's kind of the hardest choice you'll have to make from the beginning, is taking that jump of faith and putting your trust in everyone that you have surrounding you, from the clinic to the agency, to attorneys, to the surrogate, everything. I always tell people that this process is not easy. It's absolutely worth it, but you really have to trust the process and walk the steps and stay excited about everything. Choosing your agency is, I believe, in the process, one of the most important things. The clinic obviously will make your babies and keep them safe, but we really are your project manager from start to finish. And so we work with the clinic at the beginning. We can even help you before you start the journey to help budget and look at the numbers, even before you begin. During the process, your agency truly sets the tone of your journey. When you're choosing an agency, do lots of research, go to third-party websites, talk to a couple of agencies, because like I said, it's once you find the agency that you connect with and you trust, or at least your gut, gives you those warm, fuzzy feelings, that will really guide your journey and how it goes and how smooth it'll be. It also will drive the type of surrogate you get. Every agency is very different, but make sure you really kind of think about what your expectations are with communication, with relationships, with how they handle rough times, and that'll be really key. Talk to not only current and past intended parents, but as well as surrogates. You want to see how everyone in the process is treated. So as I said before, the agency really sets the tone. You want to find out what kind of services do they provide. Can they help you with egg donors if you don't find one at the clinic? Obviously the surrogates, and what other partnerships, domestically as well as international. So if you are an international intended parent, you want them to know what the laws look like, or someone they can contact within their home country to talk about, reintegrating the baby back to your country when you go home. Talk about cost and payment structures and how they recruit their surrogates. Are they just marketing online or in publications? Are they done by referrals? Also ask the questions about what are the most important values that they look for in a surrogate candidate. For us, it's not just about the medical process. We want someone that's truly invested and has more of an altruistic thought that's driving them, and not a financial one. That's how we, at Surro Connections, we really start navigating through our candidate pools. We have a lot of times where candidates may be a great medical fit, but they're just not a good fit for our agency. And we happily release them to go to an agency that will fit them better. You want to always ask about the wait list and time of matching, and what kind of support you and your surrogate get. At Surro Connections, we have our whole staff is our surrogates, as well as we have an intended mother on staff. So everybody not only kind of knows the business side of things, but we've all lived in this, in the environment that you're about to walk through personally. So it's really important to look at that kind of structure. And is the agency all business, or does it offer a personal touch? And really, if that's important to you or not. Okay. Also, you want to talk about not only the support, but the availability. Are they only available to you Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, not on bank holidays? Our agency specifically is available 24 hours a day to all parties. And I say that because there's been plenty of times on a Saturday where I've had to text message Dr. Thornton and update him or get his advice. So also, what kind of partnerships? Specifically, I'm talking partnerships with legal teams. We have a lot of legal teams that do flat rates for our clients instead of just by the hour. So it does save you a little bit of money, and you kind of can control your costs. Also, we can help you with baby insurance, the baby arrival, and then at the hospital, dealing with the insurance, dealing with the hospital, the birth certificate paperwork, and then the passport to get you back home. Okay. So just a quick rundown of what we help you manage, the pathway to parenthood. Once you sign on with our agency, we assess your desires and expectations. What does your family look like? What does your support look like? What are you wanting as an end result? Not only just the baby, but what is the relationships along the way that you want to keep? Are they forever? Are they just short term? We kind of walk you through that. We, during the match, we send you a couple of profiles. You get to take a look. I always tell people kind of trust your gut. And if you see something that you don't connect with, just easily walk away from that match. You really want to make sure you have a connection, because if not, it's going to be a very long journey, and it can make for a really rough path for you. Just going through this real quick, we review the health insurance for the surrogate. We can also refer you to newborn insurance if you're international. Domestic clients have a little bit easier time when they can just add them as a dependent. We work closely with the clinic on making sure that the surrogate goes through her testing. If she needs travel, we handle all of that, as well as expenses. We also coordinate, once they do start their medication, we also coordinate their localized monitoring centers and make sure those are paid as well. We make sure everyone has a psych eval, very important, not a step you want to miss. We navigate everyone through the legal contract process, both the surrogate as well as the intended parents. We make sure everyone has their own representative, and we are not attorneys, so we just refer you to the people that know that best. Once the contracts are signed, you establish an escrow account, and then you start the IVF cycle with the clinic. 9 months of pregnancy, we check in with our surrogates weekly, just to kind of see, like, how are they feeling. We talk to them again like surrogates, and we just kind of walk them through the everyday, what it's like, how are things going, when's your next appointment, things like that. Around 20 weeks is when we start judgment parentage process with the legal teams. We, again, aren't attorneys, but we trigger that action for everyone. And so we make sure that we get the parentage process done in enough time, just in case your little one comes early. We help you prepare for child's birth. And we always give tips on if you're traveling in for the birth, what that looks like, what to bring, what not to bring, things like that. And then again, we can help with the preparation of the departure home with the passports for our international clients. Everyone always asks, like, what do you look for when you get a profile for a surrogate? My biggest piece of advice is really be authentic and true to what you want and what your family wants. Never settle. Talk about communication when you're on a match call. Also, relationship expectations before, during, and after the birth. And I say this because even though you may say at the beginning, like, I don't know what I want later, just say that and be honest about it. Sometimes promises make for a rough relationship towards the end. And just know that when your baby comes, everything changes. So we want to make sure that everyone's just really open to an organic relationship and not something that is forced from either side. Know their support, spouse, agency, family, friends. If you're able to visit, be involved, because they want you involved, and you want to be involved in the pregnancy and the delivery, and everyone kind of settles and goes their separate ways at the end. But know who their support is, so when the baby does arrive, they have theirs and you have your baby, and you can bond accordingly. What are your views on termination or reductions? This is not a gray area for anyone and should never be settled on. This absolutely 100% has to be agreed upon during the match. You definitely don't want a mismatch at this point. And then also, are there timeline concerns? So does she have trips coming up? Does she have family get-togethers? Is the holidays? Do we take a pause until that's done? We just want to kind of look at all of that as you're getting to the match. Also, we always ask that people really look at the personality and lifestyle of the surrogate and their common interests. So it's a really long year of communication, and you kind of run out of things to talk about when you're done talking about baby and how you're feeling and baby development and things. That it's just nice to become friends based on common interests more than anything. Also, cost and fee expectations. As much as we don't want you to talk about money with your surrogate, because it's the worst conversation ever, but make sure that when you get a profile that you know what those costs and fee expectations are, so you're able to make a full decision based on all the factors. We don't want any surprises. So again, I do want to stress this, communication is so important in this process. Lots of cultural and religious and family differences. We just really want to be respectful of everyone. Everything is not going to go perfect. We can try to limit risk, but Mother Nature sometimes takes the lead, and baby always takes the lead. And so you just really don't know what's going to come up. I always suggest set a weekly date or a bi-weekly date. So like Sunday at 7 o'clock, you guys do a quick call or a Skype, something that's easy for everyone, that works for everyone. If you have any concerns, talk to your agency, talk to a third party, and just know down the road, things do change. So when the baby comes, you're not gonna be talking every week or every 2 weeks. Maybe send them pictures once a month, once every couple months. Also, no assumptions. It's so hard to communicate clearly over text or email. If you have concerns, just really be transparent, be you. And if you're worried, talk to your agency, okay? With any agency, as much as you guys are the intended parents and expecting the bundle of joy, your surrogate really, from an agency's perspective, has to be a major priority for an agency. Again, we personalize our support to all of our surrogates. We're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And again, we're surrogates ourselves. It's really just really important that she knows she can have someone to talk to that's been there, done that, and that she's not going to be judged to ask a silly question. So financial aspect, I'm just going to go kind of high level here, but really when you're going into this, I work with, again, with a lot of intended parents that we work on budgets even before we start. You know, look at what the picture looks like for the clinic. What is or isn't included? If something, let's say the first transfer doesn't work, what are the additional costs? Really try to look at the big picture, just in case. What are the surrogate compensation expenses, legal process, insurance, medical costs? If the surrogate has to travel, and that's for, let's say, her testing day or the transfer, what are your newborn costs? And then if you are international, how much is it going to be for you to travel, stay in the US, and then the passport cost to get you back home? Really find out and plan out the payment timings and how that's broken down. Who helps you monitor your budget? Are you guys going to be doing it internally, or does your agency help? And just really know the factors that can come up. Obviously, we hope that it's very smooth, but sometimes, again, baby comes early, something happens that's not planned. Really look at what could be those budget busters in the long term. Legal process, again, this is very high level, and we help you kind of project manage this. Again, we're not attorneys. We look at the very, very beginning when we're doing legal contracts, we want a plan of action from the beginning that follows you all the way through the end in your parentage, birth certificate, and passport. Each party has to have their own representative in all parts, and that contract really outlines the intentions, establishes financial agreements and considerations. Again, we're going to go back to being very clear when it comes to termination reduction, and any kind of travel restrictions, anything in the contract that you may be worried about, what she eats, no smoking, drinking, all that good stuff. And for our agency, we only require this, or we want you to do this after full medical clearance. So if for some reason she screens out or you guys change your mind, then you haven't wasted money on any legal fees. The second part of the legal team's job is to start the parentage around 20 weeks. And again, you guys will have your own representatives, and it's really walking through not only the parentage, but the birth plan, and we can help you with that as well. And then liaise with the hospital and medical professionals So they know even before the baby's born what that plan is and what that looks like. Again, we help with filling out the birth certificate information as well as passport assistance, but that's us and not usually the legal teams. So this is really all about your family. It's not about anyone else. We're all coming together to help you and to help you build your family. Be true to yourself and honest with everyone. Again, trust that the process, it is the hardest part. On the right-hand side here, I was actually in the room where these twins were born, and then here they are when they're 2 with their parents in Austria. So we really, connect with everyone from start to finish, and then hopefully afterwards. I recently went to Italy, and my kids and I went to see. We were there for vacation, but we went to see one of our clients in Naples, and we spent the day with them, and it was just really nice to see the interaction and the love that the baby brought to just more than the parents. So it was pretty amazing. Just remember also there's going to be bumps, and it's just really how your support system around you helps you navigate those bumps and mitigate whatever risks we can. But also we're really excited and happy for you once that baby's born. And that's all I have. I'm going to give it back to Juan.
Thank you very much, Megan, for those wonderful tips. Just to finish the presentations, I'm just going to introduce very briefly a few aspects. I see there is a couple of questions over here waiting to be responded, and we'll deal with those in a moment. I will just share my screen briefly. Let me see, here we are. There we go. So basically, what I want to show you, what I want to speak to you briefly is about a few aspects from the perspective of the international parent, right? So which are the main concerns that we have as international parents? Obviously, a very big one is the financial aspect, and that's been already covered a little bit by Megan. As an intended parent, we have to prepare for quite a large budget. And of course, choosing the right providers is our #1 task. We need to find the agency and the clinic that will give us the most confidence to move forward with. For many people, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build their families in this way through egg donation and surrogacy. So the right choice is the most important decision they have to make right in the beginning. From the international perspective, language and culture, yes, not everybody is fluent in English, and even people who speak fairly good English don't feel confident enough to venture into this. The reality is that once you start in your journey, even if your English is not so good, up to as far as you're concerned, as far as your opinion is concerned, you find that you can navigate quite well. What we try to do to mitigate that is to have staff with us who speaks multiple languages, so we can support you in that respect as much as possible. Another aspect that people can fear when they embark in this journey, it's the coordination of the multiple parties. And Dr. Thornton did discuss that, did present that in his presentation in the beginning. There are multiple parties involved in surrogacy, and one of them is the clinic, another one is the agency, and then there is often the legal professionals that will support us both in the US and also in our home country. So the coordination of these can be daunting. we at American Fertility, what we try to do is to mitigate that as much as possible and to hold your hand as much as possible, working in coordination with the agency, like with Megan in Surro Connections, and to try to help as much as possible with coordinating all these multiple parties. Another question that comes very often from the international perspective is the trips. People very often ask how many times I have to travel, how long I have to be there. Right, the reality is that not as many times as you think. Normally 2 trips is enough, and one of them is actually very short, which is to give your genetic material. In fact, in some cases, you can skip this trip. If you can travel for some reason, you can ship the genetic material to us. Although I must say that most often it just works better for you to travel to the US for a few days, and that works out cheaper as well, normally, than having to ship material from abroad. Another aspect that we get asked very often by international parents is the legal side for the home country. So for the US side, everything is pretty much clear. Surrogacy only happens in states where the law is protective of surrogacy and there is no risk for the intended parents. So that side is totally covered. Then the other side, which is in your home country, it really changes a lot from country to country. And we find that in some countries, like for example in Spain, you can do all the paperwork, all the legal work in Spain without much help, because it's pretty simple. But then there are other countries where you must absolutely have an attorney, right? This would be the case of France or Germany, where you must have an attorney over there who can help you with, not only help you with the work, but also advise you on how your surrogacy journey should be organized in the United States to make it easier afterwards when you come back in your home country. The truth is that we never heard of any babies being held in the United States, neither not being allowed in their home countries. In the USA, we can say that it is the safest destination with that respect, and babies leave with an American passport, and when they arrive in their home country, then there is always a solution to arrange all the paperwork in their home country. Finally, just to touch briefly the social side, this is a question that comes often from parents when they start looking into the surrogacy and egg donation journey, right? They get concerned in how is this going to be accepted by their families or their social environments, at work, in their neighborhoods. There are groups and forums that discuss this. I mean, I can tell you from my personal perspective that I was very surprised that my environment has never rejected my family model. We are 2 men, so we are gay parenting with 2 children. And I must say that I'm very, very surprised that really I had not any difficult situations whatsoever. Everything is being treated with a lot of normality. And what I hear, the feedback I hear from other parents in other countries as well, are very similar. So it's not so hard as you think it may be. It's actually easier, fortunately. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen because there are some questions that came up. More questions can come up, of course. And if you want, maybe the easiest is if I read the questions and say to whom they are directed, and then the speakers, the panelists, they can answer them. So I have here one from David for Dr. Thornton. And David is asking, can you recommend egg sharing, or do you see any disadvantages in that? Dr. Thornton?
Thank you, Juan. So egg sharing, or what we call split donor cycles, are very common to do. I showed you an example here in the PowerPoint where this is a good case for egg sharing, where the donors that we were able to retrieve 35 eggs, and there were 2 separate couples. The one couple received 15 eggs and the other couple received 15 eggs, so equal number of eggs. And at the end of the day, one couple ended up with 8 embryos frozen and the other couple ended up with 5 embryos frozen, both of which are enough to complete your family. So these split cycles or shared cycles are a good way to help you develop your family. It also helps lower the cost, because now the cost of the entire cycle split between both families. We recommend this for a single sperm source. This will be hard to split a shared cycle if you have 2 sperm sources. So it's really recommended for a single sperm source. And it's very good for someone who's looking to have 1, maybe 2 children at the most.
Excellent. Dr. Thornton, thank you for your answer. I see another question here from James, and it's directed for Megan. And he's asking, what's the current situation with Obamacare for surrogate babies?
Sure. So that is a big, insurance in the US is a big mess. And even for citizens, it's even more complicated with international couples or parents. I actually just spoke with Virginia from Art Risk yesterday about some additional options that can be available. The safest way is newborn insurance through a Lloyd's of London policy. It is very, very expensive, but what we want to do is we want to make sure you're well educated on the pros and cons of the insurance. So I would actually defer you to this insurance company that deals with this all day, every day. There's lots of things that can be negotiated instead of those big Lloyd's of London policies, whether it's cash pay, at the hospital. A healthy baby born recently at a Nevada hospital, it was $900 cash, and that was the birth and the room for a day and a half for the parents and the baby. But again, that was no complications. It gets really messy with when the babies, if there's some kind of intervention that has to happen and they are in the NICU. But again, I'm gonna have to defer on policies directly to Art Risk, and I can send out that information to anyone who would like to talk to them directly. Obamacare or ACA plans are generally not available, even because the baby's not born of a US resident or citizen. But again, Art Risk is going to be the one to talk with on that.
Thank you, Megan. We have another question from Tony. We are a male gay couple, but not married. Would that be any issue in terms of getting a surrogate or having any issue when getting birth certificate for the baby? So Megan, maybe you can answer that one as well.
Yep, I can. Okay, so when it comes to birth certificates and parentage, there's lots of different ways that this scenario can work and be very smooth. I would always recommend, there's a good handful of states that I would work with and match you with a surrogate in those states, knowing your situation. So like my presentation said earlier, is really kind of looking at the whole picture when we're at a matching point. So if we were to match you, it would be with a surrogate in one of these states that I know that this issue would not be an issue. So legally, you both can be on the birth certificate. A lot of states do grant a pre-birth judgment saying that you don't have to be married, and it can just be 2 parents on the birth certificate. There's also a way called a step-parent adoption, where the biological dad would go on the birth certificate, and then the other dad would be put on the birth certificate after the baby's born in an additional judgment. Very possible. We do it all the time. You don't have to be married, except in a couple of states you have to be married, but just make sure your agency knows what those state laws include and how they'll impact your family down the line.
Thank you, Megan. If anybody else has any questions, you can type them in, please. In the meantime, maybe I can open this this poll, which is a 4-question poll. It's very very fast, and it will be available for the next few seconds. In the meantime, if anybody would like to type any questions that we can answer right now. Right, thank you very much. We have 3 votes on the poll, 4 votes, 5 votes, thank you. Any questions from anyone that you can think of? Of course, I will give you now the contact details, which I will put on the screen. So you can also note down in case you wish to contact us at a later stage to ask any questions. We offer complimentary consultation, so you can schedule a consultation with the clinic or the agency or both, and that's complimentary. Let me show you in the screen the contact details. Here we are. So we have another question over here. Let me see. Would you recommend, actually, this question either Megan or Dr. Thornton can answer. Would you recommend for us to separate the donor and surrogate journeys?
I can answer that, and then give it over to Dr. Thornton. I always suggest if you're using an egg donor, go ahead and start everything at the same time. That way you're going to cut the timing on your journey down by 2 to 3 months. The surrogate process from start to finish, just getting her through testing and contracts, that part sometimes can take 2 or 3 months, and that's by that time when your donor is actually done and your embryos are made, then your surrogate can begin almost immediately after that. So from the surrogate, the agency side, I recommend going both, as long as you're using an egg donor and there's very low risk of not getting any embryos. Okay. Dr. Thornton?
Dr. Thornton?
I would say I absolutely agree. You should start both your egg donor creating embryos and your surrogacy journey at the same time. With today's technology and freezing embryos is the perfect scenario. Freeze your embryos, and that's important because sometimes couples want to have a certain sex transferred, and many times we find that they may not have the right sex. And so you have time to create more embryos to get that right sex embryo that you want to transfer to your surrogate. So that's why it's important to do both of them at the same time. Have your embryos created, and by the time you find your surrogate, we have the right embryos for transfer.
Thank you, Dr. Thornton. We have another question from the same participant. For me and my partner, what should be the first steps that we should take to get tested and start the process?
I'll answer that question. The first step that we should do is, like I mentioned in my presentation, should always start off with a semen analysis to make sure that you have a healthy sperm count. You can also do infectious disease screening locally. We always repeat that with your FTAs when you come here. But the most important thing is to start off with a sperm analysis. And for any women who are creating embryos to use with a surrogate, it's also important to have your egg reserve checked before creating embryos to make sure we know the right amount of medication and how you're going to respond and anticipate how many eggs you're going to be able to produce with your IVF cycle.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If we have any additional questions, otherwise you can reach out to us via email or phone and set up a call with us to resolve your further questions.
All right, thank you.
Well, okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. I hope you
Great,
enjoyed the
thank you.
webinar and find it. Sorry, Megan. Yes, you want to add something?
Oh no, I was just saying thank you to everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Juan and Megan, it was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you,
you.
everyone. Oh, somebody's just saying we will send out the presentation. We will send you a link via email with the presentation so you can watch it later at your leisure. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening or a good afternoon. Thank you.